You're welcome back to the Lunchtime Show. The text line for your messages is 53106. This is Damien Kiberd. Now, we're going to talk about banking for the next while on the programme. The government is in the process, or the Department of Finance is in the process of releasing 50 detailed documents to the Public Accounts Committee concerning its state of knowledge at the time it gave the banking guarantee covering 400 billion in September 2008. We're joined now by Fine Gael Finance spokesman Michael Noonan, TD for Limerick East, and also by Frank Fahey, TD, Fianna Fáil TD for Galway West, and by Dan Boyle of the Green Party. Michael Noonan, first to you, good afternoon.
Hello, Damien, how are you?
Now, you've had an opportunity to read at least some of these documents in detail, and you say they effectively show Brian Cowan and Brian Lenihan torpedoing the Irish economy. What do you mean by that?
Well, they acted against the advice they got from Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch advised not to give a blanket guarantee, which would include all the liabilities of the banks. They also advised against a rescue of Anglo-Irish Bank. They said, in effect, it should be made the toxic bank for the other banks and wound down systematically. But the most important thing that has emerged is that despite the fact that Brian Lenihan and Brian Cowan always insisted that what we faced on the night of the guarantee was a solvency crisis, it's now clear from a minute by David Doyle, the then Secretary at Finance, dated the 25th of September, that he had warned them about the emerging solvency crisis. He said that there was a black hole appearing in Anglo-Irish to the tune of 8.5 billion, and that the hole in Irish Nationwide was 2 billion. That was the 25th of September, not at the last minute, several days before they took the decision on the guarantee, and they were clearly warned by the head of the Department of Finance at a meeting where they both attended with the regulator, with the central bank governor, with the Attorney General, with some outside advisors, and David Doyle, accompanied by the present Secretary, Kevin Cardiff, gave this advice, and it's minuted.
Absolutely. Well, I'll just read it for the benefit of listeners. It says, D. Doyle noted the government would need a good idea of the potential loss exposure within Anglo and INBS. On some assumptions, INBS could be 2 billion after capital and Anglo could be 8.5. That's verbatim from that document you're referring to there.
Now, how a government would not take that into account in their decision making and come into the Dáil to legislate for a guarantee and insist right through the debate, even when it was put to them by myself, that what we were dealing with was a liquidity crisis and that it didn't have solvency implications. It defies belief that they could have maintained that position.
Well, one of the reasons we have a huge millstone round our necks at present is because Anglo has to be bailed out for 22 billion and Irish Nationwide for 2.7 billion. What you're saying is that would your interpretation of Merrill Lynch's advice be that poorer banks shouldn't be allowed to continue?
Well, they were explicit about Anglo-Irish, and they gave the advice that, in effect, not to rescue it, but to turn it into a bad bank, which would be the receptacle for the bad debts of all the other banks. And it should have the good bank, bad bank model, with Anglo-Irish serving the role of the bad bank for all the other banks. But the essential thing I'm focusing on here from reading the early documents are, number one, Merrill Lynch advised against the blanket guarantee. Number two, in document 5, Anglo-Irish actually didn't request a blanket guarantee. They wanted their primary creditors and their depositors guaranteed. But more importantly, on the 25th, several days before the crisis, the Secretary of the Department of Finance clearly advised the Taoiseach, the Minister for Finance, the Attorney General, and all the regulators who were around that table, that there was a huge solvency crisis in Anglo and Irish Nationwide coming down the track, and that was hidden from the Dáil when the guarantee legislation was put before the House.
That's a very important issue. What do you regard as the consequences of that for Brian Lenihan and for Brian Cowan?
The consequences for me personally is I took their guarantee on the night. I wasn't on the front bench at the time, but I raised the solvency issue. They assured me that it was a liquidity issue, and I accepted that at face value, and I, with the rest of the Fine Gael party, voted for the guarantee.
Dan Boyle.
If we had full information, we wouldn't have.
Okay, Dan Boyle, you're a finance spokesperson for the Green Party and TD for Cork South Central. How do you react to what Michael Noonan said there? This stuff about a temporary cash problem is just rubbish.
Well, I'm a senator, Damien, but
Senator, sorry.
I've been a TD for Cork South Central. Well, I think we're going to come across quite a lot of this about everyone being wise in retrospect. Of course, when the decision was made in September 2008, it was on the foot of conflicting pieces of advice. And just because Merrill Lynch says something can be done a different way doesn't mean that that's precisely the way it should be done or would have ended up with a better result. And I think the opposition will try to make more of it than there is. In retrospect, there are decisions in relation to the bank guarantee that showed that the situation is probably going to cost the Irish taxpayer more than it should, but we only know that in retrospect. And on the night in question and the time leading up to it, a decision had to be made in relation to whether there was going to be capital flight, whether there was going to be a run on the banks, whether it was going to affect international confidence and the cost of borrowing to the country. And we have a considerable public expenditure deficit that we have to meet by borrowing more than 20 billion every year. So they're the factors at play that the government made a decision on.
Can I just put a point to you? Merrill Lynch said, please don't have a blanket guarantee. It will damage your credit rating and it will allow poor banks to continue in existence. And it said you could have a thing called a secured lending scheme whereby the banks would bring commercial property assets to the government and get cash for them and tie them over. That was an alternative system. Why was that not done? You're paying millions to Merrill Lynch for advice, after all.
Well, I don't know the extent to which Merrill Lynch were consulted to the government or what they were being paid. I doubt if it was anything like that scale. But in relation to the decision that had to be made, the bank guarantee in retrospect has been the right decision.